Good evening, everybody. We're here early, 7:56 p.m. right now, here for the member stream. Glad you guys are here. Austin's in the chat with a how's it going? Also acknowledging how early I am. Clax is here with a little classes in session. I hope class is in session. I'm going to do my best here with these questions. We're going to talk about some trades. We're going to talk through some of these questions about contending or rebuilding, and I'm gonna try to knock those out. First question here was from Austin, which isn't even really a question, it's more of an assumption. Discuss why you messed up with Jaden at 1. I don't think I messed up ranking Jaden Daniels first overall. I think we're really being reactionary about Josh Allen 40-point game. I know it's partly in jest, but I know there's a lot of people in the Discord who do think Allen is 101. I really don't care if you take Allen 101. I have them in the same tier for a reason. I think you can go either way. The reason I have Daniels at 1 is just that, again, I think he's that good. I think he's going to score comparably to these other quarterbacks, and so the age difference is worthwhile to me. For what it's worth, Josh Allen averaged 22.8 points per game last year. Jaden Daniels has scored over 20, I believe, in each game so far. So anyway, that's why I have him at 1. Again, I know it's mostly trolling. Allen, Daniels, even Lamar, you can justify at 1. The rankings don't have to be linear, but it is my preference. I think I actually have more Allen in Dynasty than Daniels, to be fair. All right. Let's see here. I don't know where I want to start. There's a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. Why is Lamar always third? I think it's just because between his two massive seasons, his MVP season in 2019 and then his season last year, he just had a lot of like just okay type of seasons. Like he was really good, but he wasn't like QB1 overall type good. He had some injuries and stuff. So I feel like with Allen, what you have is like the consistent peak ceiling all the time. He's always on the field. He's always like top 2 in points. And then with Daniels, you get the age thing. And so those are the two angles for those guys being 1. There's like Lamar's just not really, there's no angle for him being 1. It's just like, yeah, he can score like Allen, but he hasn't done it as consistently. He's not as young as Daniels. Like you could take him 1, like he could finish as the QB1. It's totally possible, but there's not like a selling point for him to be ahead of the other two guys, in my opinion. All right. So I'm going to start by hitting on something that's really broad here, which was one of the first things that was asked. Can you talk through how to not panic if you trade a first-round pick and start 0-2? I feel like I made a good trade, but my team is underperforming and probably going to be in this spot. Well, it certainly depends on the team. I mean, if you traded a first and you got what you think was good value, I don't think we need to immediately think like that was a terrible decision. 0-2 teams can absolutely make the playoffs. There's a lot of variance when it comes to scheduling. Like you could have gotten 2 hard matchups against really good teams to start. You might have games against teams that are tanking late in the season. You might have matchups against teams that decide to tank part way through the season. So there's just like a lot of random variance that can hit. And if you're underperforming and you have reason to believe your team's going to start performing, again, that's not like a death sentence. The nice thing about having Soldier first is you at least have some clarity about what you're trying to accomplish. And so you can just kind of make moves with a mind to hopefully make the playoffs without compromising future value. We're not going to start sinking 2027 picks in to make an all-in push, because that doesn't work. But you know that you don't have to bail early. If you don't have your first, you can kind of just compete until, the wheels fall off. And then you can turn around and sell all your pieces to guys that are still competing before the deadline. So, Doc, you did not miss me apologizing for anything. You missed me doubling down on having Daniels at 101, but just explaining why I think it's totally fine to take Allen if you want to. Russell asks, what do we do with Samson now? Good buy window, or do we sell to people not paying attention? I don't think anybody that's playing Dynasty is like unaware that Quinshon Judkins is practicing and probably going to play this week. Like that seems wishful thinking. I think if you wanted to sell Dylan Sampson for like a random 2027 second, I think that would be a fine thing to do. I also think it would be fine to hold him and just sort of see what happens. Like he's still a rookie. There's a lot of uncertainty about how much Judkins will play. We have pretty good reason to think that Dylan is a decent player, or Sampson is a decent player. So there are still scenarios where he can assert himself potentially as the 1A here, or Judkins could get hurt, or he could still get suspended. For what it's worth, I mean, I think I would take Sampson over Kyle Williams in a third, or at the very least, that's an even trade. But I think probably a win for the Sampson side. Like, I still have Kyle Williams in that late 2 zone, but like we don't really know if or when he's ever gonna get on the field and perform. If Kayshon Bouttie's looking this good week in and week out, it's going to be really hard for him to get on the field at all. And Sampson's going to stay on the field. At the very least, he's earned the I mean, we'll see about co-starter. I think that's possible. At the very least, he's going to have a role probably in that passing down situation. Michael Douglas says, this is the first year I've done social media for fantasy football. I've always just done my thing. I'm amazed at the overreaction based on 1 or 2 games. Yeah, it's a fine line between reacting properly and not underweighting what we've seen so far versus overreacting. But I'll go back to what I said, I think, on the stream last week, that points per game is not as predictive as redraft ADP until after week 4. So whatever you see in terms of fantasy scoring through the first 3 games, it's still on average less predictive of season-long finish than where these guys were drafted. So we still want to care about guys that were going in the first, second, third round. Like somebody like Kenneth Walker, for example, right? He scored 5 points last week. It still matters more that he was a 4th or 5th round redraft pick. I think 4th round redraft pick versus the fact that he had a bad week 1. Like those, you can kind of balance those things out. And so you don't want to swing too far in the other direction. But I do think the places where you want to overreact are with rookies. Carter, what's up, man? Welcome to the stream. Glad you can make it. Goldhorn here. Always looking for the golden fleece. What am I missing here? Like, Jay, you're always looking for the golden fleece. I'm so confused. I get that I get the mythology, and you're looking for but or is this like a joke about trades? I'm sorry, it went over my head. I get the mythology reference, but I don't know what it was referring to. All right. So anyway, broad message would be: don't panic after week 1. Your team is probably not dead. Some teams might be dead. It's possible. If you have a team where you weren't sure whether you should be competing or not, and you got some clarity in week 1 because Brock Purdy got hurt and RJ Harvey barely played and Josh Downs barely played or barely produced, and you're like, I don't know, I have multiple starters that are not playing, or George Kittle is going on IR. Like, if you have a team that was on the edge and things went really bad in week 1, you don't need to feel bad about pulling the plug. Like, that was always going to be an option. And the fact that you're doing it now in week 1 is not necessarily a problem. You don't have to go out and do every single possible trade to compete. A lot of times that can make things worse. So it's not to say that you can't pivot to a rebuild at this point, but at the same time, just because you scored a low amount of points in week 1 does not mean that you need to immediately flip. I think I have a good roster here to look at as an example. Let me see. Okay, yeah, like I have this team here, and you guys can tell me, like, maybe I'm wrong, but this doesn't seem like a team that needs to immediately pivot and start rebuilding. I think it's a decent team. I did lose Kittle to the IR, but I've got Jaden Daniels, Geno Smith, Daniel Jones at quarterback, Amari and Hampton, Kenneth Walker, Jalen Warren, RJ Harvey at running back. I've got Puka Nakua, Ted McMillan, Emeka Egbuka, Jalen Waddle, Jawan Jennings at wide receiver. And then I have Kittle, who I just put on IR, with Njoku and Terrence Ferguson at tight end. That doesn't sound like a team to me that needs to rebuild, but I did score the 10th most points in week 1. So that kind of thing happens. I had a bad week. I'm projected to lose this week already because my opponent played Tucker Kraft and Zach Ertz in what is a 1.0 tight end premium league. And actually, no, it's not a 1.0 tight end premium. It's a 0.75 tight end premium league. Yeah, 0.75 tight end premium. He played Ertz and Kraft against me. He also has Derrick Henry, Malik Neighbors. He has Brock Bowers. That would be the one spot where Brock Bowers being out would actually help me in a big way. But, whatever. We'll see what happens. I'm projected to lose by 30 points, which seems a little bit aggressive, to be honest. I think they're a little bit light on the Egbuka projection. I think they're a little bit heavy on some of these other ones, but we will persevere. We'll see what happens. Oh, man. Chat's blowing up now. Nico, what's up? Carter is trying to tear down from Jefferson. What's the type of value you'd be looking to get back? I mean, why are we tearing down from Jefferson, I guess would be the first question. Because it's hard to give a suggestion for the trade if I don't know what the purpose is. Like if you're in a rebuild situation, certainly you want to get some, you would want to be targeting another young elite receiver with at least a first on top. If you're just competing and you're like looking for additional depth, then it's like maybe we can find a different way to do that. I mean, if someone's going to give you, like I think London and a first is about fair for Jefferson. I'd want more than JSN and a first for Jefferson. I don't think you're going to get JSN and 2 firsts. But yeah, like someone in the Brian Thomas, Puka Nakua, Nico Collins range plus a first is like, I think pretty fair to ask for. Some more encouragement here from Goldhorn. 0-2 is nothing if you have a great team. I started 0-3 2 years back on a team coming out of a startup. I knew my team was great. It lost one more game that year and won the title. Yeah, so it can happen for sure. It really is case by case, though. When you talk about overreacting to rookies, do you mean when the rookie does something positive? Yes, I do mean that. We don't want to overreact to rookies underperforming in the first few games of the season. That's what we should expect. That should kind of be the default expectation for these guys. I mean, there's additional reasons for concern, like when you think a player is going to have a role and then that role is maybe much smaller than you think it should be. Like, I don't know. I struggle to not be concerned about Jaden Higgins running significantly fewer routes than like Xavier Hutchinson, because we were getting these positive reports about Higgins in the offseason, in training camp, and then Christian Kirk goes down, and it's like, okay, big roles coming for Higgins, maybe for Jalen Noel, and they're running out this like very clearly bad wide receiver ahead of him in Xavier Hutchinson, even Justin Watson running ahead of him early in the game. Like, it's hard for me to not be concerned about that. But at the same time, Olamide Zaccheaus was running more routes than Luther Burden. So I don't know. Sometimes it just has to do with your priors, I guess, how much you care about this stuff. So I have made a few trades that I would like to talk about here. Just talk through my thought process on some of these deals that I've made since week 1. And then we'll come back to these other questions, a lot of which are about consolidating or shifting from rebuild to contending and everything like that. Yella did ask me to re-rank the rookies based on the year so far. I'm not really sure how that would be different than just looking at the dynasty rankings and seeing where the rookies are in the dynasty rankings. So for time purposes, I'm going to skip that one. But Yella, if you want to go and look at the rankings, you can certainly see how all the rookies are ranked. I might do a video on that at some point during the year, maybe in a couple months, in a month or two. But we're going to skip that for now. I've got two different Carters hitting me with questions here. So the Justin Jefferson trade is about depth, starting Noah Brown and Jalen Tolbert in my wide receiver 4 spot, 14-man league. We start 4 wide receivers. Yeah, that's a lot of wide receivers. Again, I still don't love the idea of like trading your best players, your difference making players, in the hopes of getting depth options, because like statistically, like your high end players are going to be the ones that differentiate you, that help you win the championships more often than not. And so it can kind of be counterproductive to split that guy up into 2 pieces that are not going to score as well. If you can stay in the elite wide receiver tier, like I said, if you can stay in I think London and Ladd McConkey are probably my firewall there. I mean, maybe JSN is sneaking into that group. I'm still very skeptical because the Seahawks they want to be run heavy. Sam Darnold is, I don't think, very good. So still skeptical of the season-long ceiling there with JSN. But if you can stay in the London, Nico, Amon-Ra, BTJ type of zone, and you can pick up enough capital, or you can pick up another startable wide receiver, then I think that's maybe worth exploring. Carter Eckel says, I have Fannin, Loveland, and Jake Ferguson in my startup 10-team Superflex non-tight end premium league. I assume with it being a startup, patience is my friend here, or should I try to capitalize? I mean, in a non-tight end premium league, unfortunately, like I don't know how exciting it is to have that many tight ends, and I don't know how much people are going to want to pay up for them. But certainly, if people are going to want to pay up for a tight end, if you think people have that need, like go to the Kittle manager, someone was starting Dallas Goedert or something, yeah, I would look to flip one of those guys. I don't really want a surplus of tight ends in non-tight end premium, because you don't ever really want to be putting one in the flex. And so it's just really hard to get as excited about having a lot of depth at tight end, because you can't use it in most cases. All right. Moving over here, I'm going to look at some trades. I'm not going to look at all these trades, but I just recently put together this little spreadsheet to keep track of the trades that I make, so that I can see when I made them and what leagues I made them in. We'll see how much work it is to maintain, but seems helpful. And since our first set of games, which was on the 7th, I have made a handful of trades. This one doesn't really need any breakdown at all. This was just a ridiculous offer that was sent to me out of the blue, and I was pretty surprised by it. Like my own 2026 first and Sam Darnold for Patrick Mahomes, Dalton Kincaid, Chris Godwin, and a 4th. My first projects as a playoff first. I probably have the second best starting lineup in the league, maybe the first. So just a really weird trade. Like nobody in the league really gets what was going on there. I just took the free gift and went on from there. And then I also was able to make this trade, which was, I feel like I have the timing wrong here. I feel like this was actually on Sunday, but I don't know. I traded Josh Downs and Chris Rodriguez for Luther Burden and Will Shipley. We've since got some negative news on, well, actually, I don't even know if that's true. I don't know what to believe anymore about Will Shipley's injury. But after what we saw from Josh Downs in that game, I'm kind of okay taking the re-roll here on Burden and just hoping that he can emerge with a larger role throughout the season. And then a few days ago, in one of my Dynasty Best Ball leagues where I was coming out of a rebuild, and I'm going to try to go back to this league for one of the questions later about pivoting from a hard rebuild to contending. In this league, I was able to trade 2 2026 firsts and my 2027 first for Nico Collins, Derrick Henry, Devonta Smith, and Devontae Adams. This guy, I had this other guy's first. I got his first by trading him Devontae Adams last September, and now he wants to tear it down. He wanted his first back, and so I was able to leverage that into a pretty large package deal where I get some pretty serious firepower. Then I traded Tyrone Tracy for a second. This is a league where I just had a lot of value tied up in running backs. I also have Breece Hall. I have Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara. I didn't really need to have Tyrone Tracy as my running back 5. And this guy needed a running back. He offered me a second. I wanted to diversify a little bit there, get some value insulation. In this league, the Gunslingers League is one I just mentioned, where I'm trying to compete. Seems like I should be able to compete, but it is a 0.25 points per carry league, which I wasn't actually thinking about when I made this trade. I don't think it matters for the context of this deal. I think I would still make the trade. It's 2 2026 firsts. Both project as playoff firsts, assuming my team can turn it around after a potentially 0-2 start. And then a 26 second and Josh Downs again for Puka Nacua. I always want to be consolidating when I can. I had some extra draft picks out of the startup. I still have multiple seconds in 2026. I have 2 2027 firsts. So I'm not totally depleted on draft capital. I was able to consolidate and add, one of the best wide receivers in fantasy. And then yesterday I made 3 deals. The first deal was in the Pure Potential Invitational number 2. I sent away A.J. Brown and Jalen Royals for Rashee Rice and a third. I actually started 0-1 in this league due to some last-minute heroics from Caleb Williams. My opponent needed 20 points from Caleb Williams. He put up like 24. So I started 0-1. So trading away A.J. Brown may be a questionable decision. I'm banking on being able to replace him. I have Deebo Samuel on the bench who really impressed week 1. I started him this week off to a good start with the 17 points per game, or 17 points, I should say, this week. And I think Rashee Rice could be outscoring A.J. Brown as soon as he comes back. Don't want to overreact too much to one game, but the team is still running the heck out of the ball when they have the chance to. And from what I've heard from other analysts, I was a little bit too focused on the outcome of the game, but people were not impressed with the offensive design for the Eagles in week 1. Not a lot of motion. We'll see if that changes. Like, again, if A.J. Brown just wasn't healthy and maybe they just simplified the game plan, I don't know. He could come out and look awesome this week against the Chiefs, and maybe this looks like a stupid trade. But I think we kind of got the confirmation we needed in preseason that Rice is healthy. Worthy is now going to miss time. I think they're going to desperately need Rice back, and they're going to put him right back in that role that he had to start last year. So I am excited to add another share of him. Then I had this other offer that I was sent, again, unsolicited, but I did have to think about it for a minute. It's another best ball league, and it's tight end premium, just regular tight end premium. I do have Brock Bowers in this league, but only had 3 really viable wide receivers, and I was offered Ricky Pearsall for Harold Fannin. And I love Harold Fannin, and I didn't want to trade him away. And I've been kind of I don't think I'm a Ricky Pearsall hater, but I was skeptical in the offseason about what we should expect from him. Everything has gone his way so far. Like, his deployment in week 1 was really, really encouraging. He obviously came through with a 100-yard game. Even without Brock Purdy for a handful of weeks, I do think the scoring upside here does probably lean towards Pearsall in most scenarios. Obviously, there are outcomes where Harold Fannin just continues like developing from this point and becomes like a true full-time player, pushes out Njoku. But like, as much as I'm excited about Fannin, I still think there are some like legitimate limitations in his game. Like, he is a little bit undersized. He's a little bit less athletic than you'd like. I don't know how much of a role he can play as an inline blocker. Like, I love Harold Fannin, and I'm happy with where I've ranked him, but I also think the odds that we're getting like a Brock Bowers type of asset here, I think are pretty low. So I was willing to send one of my shares away to get myself a chance with Pearsall. And then we have this last one. I sent away David Njoku for Juwan Johnson and a third. Austin hates this trade for some reason. Here's the deal. I don't know if I make this deal if I wasn't so massively overexposed to David Njoku in Dynasty. I just was so sick of going to settle my lineups and seeing that I have David Njoku in like all of them. Not really all of them. I think I have like 24%. But I was sick of seeing Njoku in so many lineups. I moved him down to my late 2 tier. I moved Juwan Johnson to early 3rd. I do not have a 3rd round pick in this league. So I added a draft pick. I added a draft pick that I can use for additional flexibility later. And then I get Juwan Johnson, who realistically like could just outscore David Njoku the rest of the season. On the waiver wire show, the Underdog waiver wire show with Jacob Sanderson and Hayden Winks, they talked about Juwan Johnson, and Jacob kind of floated the question like, why wouldn't we rank Juwan Johnson ahead of Njoku and Andrews and Ingram the rest of the season? Juwan Johnson ran like 97% of the routes for the Saints in week 1. They attempted like 42 passes. Their team is terrible. They're going to have to throw the ball a lot. Kellen Moore runs up tempo, and Kellen Moore doesn't do a lot of design targets, especially to running backs. So his target tree is consolidated very heavily to wide receivers and tight ends. That's what we saw last year in Philadelphia between A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and Dallas Goedert. I think that's what we're going to see with Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and Juwan Johnson. He's always been a really good athlete. If the team's just going to let him play a full-time role after giving him a pretty decently sized contract in the offseason, there's really no reason to think that he can't produce as like a top 10 or top 12 tight end this year. And could Njoku also do that? He could. But again, there is this risk of Harold Fannin somehow growing his role further and reducing Njoku's role. And if you want to think about like viable targets in the offense, the Browns have Tillman, Judy, Fannin, and Njoku, and they are going to get a quarterback downgrade at some point, although I guess the Saints could too with Tyler Shugg. But in the Saints offense, it's just Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and Juwan Johnson as far as the wide receivers and tight ends are concerned. So it can be a little bit more consolidated between those 3 guys. So anyway, I feel fine about this deal. I didn't think it was like I fleeced or anything. I thought it was a fair trade that allows me to pivot off of one of my David Njoku shares. I don't really understand having a strong reaction to it one way or the other, to be honest with you. It sucks based on where we had Njoku ranked just a little while ago, but we have to react to what we know now. So anyway, and this only goes back to the 15th because that's when I started the trade channel back up in the Discord. So I just looked back at all those trades and put them in here. I did not care nearly enough to go digging through like my camera roll or going and digging through like my trade DMs on Sleeper. So I just decided to start here on August 15th and track ahead. Goldhorn going and looking through some of these other trades back here. Harvey trade was a smash. Yeah, I was happy to get that trade done. This is a 0.25 points per carry league, I believe. Or maybe not 0.25. That seems too high. What are the settings for this league? I guess I could put the settings in. It feels like a lot of work though. 0.1 point per carry league. So a slight bump to the running backs there. So that helps. But I liked that deal. And then the Thornton trades, like, yeah, one of them just came in unprompted. One person sent me like a 3rd rounder for Thornton, and then I countered with a 2nd. And I think they declined it, and then later they sent it back with the same offer, and they're like, I guess I'll take it. So, yeah. So those are the trades. We're going to go back. Austin, what does this mean? He's not outscoring him. Who's not outscoring whom? Clarify. All right, let me go back to the pinned questions here. No more about my trades. Okay. Here are some questions here. One from Nate. When do you overpay for a running back? From Stubborn People, if you start 0-4 but have Puka. Okay. Well, we can't be making all of our decisions based on whether or not you have Puka Nacua. It would be nice to compete on a team that has Puka Nacua. Having him does not automatically make you a contender. I think I've seen the team that you're talking about, though, and it does seem like it should be able to compete if you could just add another competent running back here. I think it depends on how much of an overpay we're talking about. Like, at some point this season, we're going to see some spot starters pop up that you should be able to get on the cheap. But it also seems like some of you play in leagues with people whose psychology does not match the league mates that I have interacted with. And frankly, it sounds really frustrating to deal with people that just like do not behave logically in any way, shape, or form. Like teams that should be rebuilding or like have no shot, that won't even listen to trades for running backs. Like I don't know exactly what you do with that. Like I think in general, I think overpaying is bad. And I think it's unlikely that unless you're swinging on like a really high upside running back, that making that one acquisition is going to be the difference between winning and not winning a championship. And so from that angle, it's like, I don't want to advise overpaying. But I think going, slightly above whatever the rankings say, I think is probably fine. If you can get your hands on a Jordan Mason, a Travis Etienne, don't go overpay for somebody that's like, I don't know. I was going to say could lose their job, but that describes Travis Etienne pretty well. Yeah, man, I don't know. It's a really tough spot to be in. Like, trust me, I trying to get running back production early in the season, really tough. We just lost Eckler. Maybe go put in a bid for Jeremy McNichols is the first thing I would say, because he's going to be really annoying and score like 7 or 8 points per game at least. But I just don't have a good like blanket answer for what you should do as far as overpaying. I'd have to know what the trades actually are. So you can hit me up in the league winner chat if you have some trade options on the table. Austin, I feel like this is totally vibes based on your end and like not based on anything. But if you have a good case for why he's not going to outscore him, please let me know. I didn't answer the trade questions yet, Austin. I'll go to those right now. Okay. Austin asked if I could review a couple of his trades, even though I already signed off on these trades in the Discord. The first one was pretty simple, trading Devontae Adams for Harold Fannin in a tight end premium league. Rankings say Fannin greater sign Adams, so that's pretty simple. Adams is what he is. He's a useful guy to have this year, but he's also 32 years old. Probably his last peak season that we have, and even that didn't get off to a great start in week 1. I think he's going to be better. He had a 27% target share, but I mean, the asset you're getting in Fannin, like, I think it's just clear that that's a more valuable piece to have. And then the other trade, a little more complicated, trading away Justin Jefferson with Xavier Worthy and a 4th for Nico Collins, Tyler Warren, and Cade Otton. I don't know why Cade Otton needed to be in this deal, but this is a tight end premium league as I understand it. Tearing down from Jefferson to Nico Collins to upgrade from Xavier Worthy to Tyler Warren. I think that's a good move. I think the difference between Warren and Worthy is probably greater or at least equal to Nico and Jefferson. But I think what you're getting with Nico and Warren is the potential to have 2 elite scarce assets. So typically when you see if there's like it's even on both sides. You want to get the best player being Jefferson. But I think in this case, you're getting two scarce assets in Warren and Nico that both have the potential to be difference makers, and you're only giving up one. So I think that's a reasonable time to tear down. Okay, moving on to the next question. When is it time to panic on a team that seems solid on paper but doesn't play well? Well, like I said, week 4 is when we reach equilibrium. If at week 4, your team should be performing based on their preseason expectations, but they're not, it might be time to just decide that it's not underperforming. It's just performing the way that it's going to perform for the rest of the year. So certainly not in week 1, probably not even in week 2. I think obviously there are some clear situations where we know right now that we can adjust how we feel about certain players. It's clear that, for example, if you had Joe Mixon and you were planning on using him, if you had George Kittle and you were relying on him, like there are a lot of situations where we have players that are injured. If we look at the rankings, like I think it's safe to say we can lower the expectations on Tua. I think it's safe to say we can lower the expectations on Josh Downs. Like he's not running a full route share. If you lost Worthy, there are different spots where you can already assume, but there are spots where you can't assume. Like the Dolphins offense, like Tyreek Hill, for example, Jalen Waddle, those guys could actually be much better in future weeks. We don't know for sure. Tony Pollard got a lot of touches in week 1, didn't score. He could be a lot better in future weeks. So Kenneth Walker could be a lot better in future weeks than he was in week 1. So there's a lot of cases where we just don't know enough yet about these situations. You got to be patient. Week 2, you can turn up the panic meter a little bit. Week 3, then it starts to, you get 3 consecutive weeks of your guys underperforming. You can really start asking some questions. But yeah, I think week 4 is kind of the magic number as far as fully pivoting. If you are 1-3 and you don't really have any reason to think that your team is going to be better the next week than it was the previous 4 weeks, I think that's when it's time to just go ahead and fold. Matthew says, I'm in a league where my team is stacked. Would like to send my first round picks for the next couple years away. Who are some guys you think are worth spending 2 to 3 firsts on, or should I hold? If you have a stacked team that has no needs, I think the sending your first away is like the opposite of what you should do, because what you want to be able to do on a stacked team is you want to give yourself a chance to add difference makers. So what I'll say is, if you can take players on your bench and you can use first round picks to upgrade those players to get scarce assets. If you can go and buy low on a Brian Thomas right now, if you can go and buy into an ascending asset like a Tyler Warren using those picks, go ahead and do it. But there are very few players available right now that you could send a first for straight up that I would advise doing that for on a stacked team. I would want to hold those firsts as partially as insurance, but obviously if you're a stacked team, probably don't need the insurance, but I just rather hold the picks, let them appreciate in value, and then trade them next offseason, or draft rookies in those spots, because even in the late first, you have a better chance of hitting on a difference-making asset that gains a lot of value. Look at Tyler Warren, look at Emeka Egbuka, look at probably Jackson Dart in about 5 weeks, than you do trading that for a player right now. So I would hold the firsts unless you are making a significant consolidation move to get a player that is in your lineup right now and has a chance to finish, near the top of their position. All right. Moving on to a question from Jabulani. I don't know if I'm going to get to all the questions tonight, but we'll see. Jabulani, how would you go from a hard rebuild to a serious contender within a relatively short time frame? Let's say you have 10 firsts over the next 3 years, but only 2 to 3 elite players in a start 11. What would your approach be so that you don't end up rebuilding too long, but at the same time, don't become a middle of the pack team? And I want to combine this with another question if I can find the question. Where's the question? Jake asked, what indicators do you look for in a rebuild that signals it's time to flip the switch and contend? Is it having a certain amount of cornerstone pieces, a certain number of picks, more of an intuitive thing? So I think it's intuitive, but I do think the basic rule is like, if you have a team that you think is top 3-ish in overall roster value or buying power in your league, you should probably be trying to make the playoffs. Like, unless you're in a league that's just not liquid or is already so settled in terms of who's competing and who's not that it's like very hard to get deals done, I would want to be trying to compete that year when I have a top 3 value team. If you feel like it's too late, you can't do that, then at the very latest, you want to be competing next year for sure. As much as I can avoid it, I don't want to be rebuilding for 2 straight seasons. I think that is only something that is viable when you have just taken over the worst, orphan teams out there, or you've just totally mismanaged things to the point that you cannot dig out of the hole in one season. But if you have 10 firsts and 2 to 3 star player, like legit star players, I think that is absolutely a team that should be looking to push in some value and compete. Again, maybe it's not happening right now because it's already, the season's underway. People are going to hold on to their scoring assets and they're going to overcharge you for them. But like, just like for future reference, if you have a team built like that, I want to be going out and starting to buy up players earlier in the offseason, trying to get this team ready to compete as soon as I can. I did this in a league. If I can pull up the roster, I don't know exactly how this will work, but there was a league that I did this type of hard reset and I was able to turn it around within a year. Let me see if I can go into the league history on Sleeper, or I should say previous leagues. Go look at the 2024 league and my team. Okay. So I tanked hard last year. When I finished the year, okay, here we go. When I finished the season in this, it's a best ball league. I finished dead last in points scored. I rostered Lamar Jackson, Malik Neighbors, Devon Achane, JJ McCarthy. Those are the only 4 players I had on my team that were worth more than like a 3rd round pick. I had like Brenton Strange. I had Jalen Coker, Isaiah Davis. Like I had literally like 4 players of any value on my team. Now that was week 17, or sorry, that was week 2 of last year. Let me see if it looks different later on. No, it doesn't look different. Those are the players I had for the year. Okay. If I look at now, that team has Lamar Jackson, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, Nico Collins, Malik Neighbors, Devon Achane, Derrick Henry, Ashton Genty, JJ McCarthy, Geno Smith, Devontae Adams, Emeka Egbuka, Devonta Smith, Trevion Henderson, Colson Loveland, and then some dart throws: Brashard Smith, Torrey Horton, still have Brenton Strange, Oronde Gadsden, Keandre Lambert-Smith. So what happened here is I drafted some rookies and I made some trades. I moved around the draft board a little bit. During the rookie draft, I was able to get Geno Smith from a team that I think wanted to pivot to a rebuild in order to trade back. And then I traded up a little bit to get Egbuka. So I added a mixture of high upside rookies. And then I took a bunch of guys late, ended up hitting on JCM. And then I just made that huge trade that I showed you guys earlier to get Henry and Nico and Adams. Basically, I was banking on some team at some point was going to go into rebuilding mode, and I was going to have the ammunition that I needed to go and buy players off of that person. Now, I was able to score the 5th most points in week 1, even before making that trade, which was fortunate. I had some big performances from Lamar, from decent performance from JCM and Neighbors, Achane, Genty. They just did enough. They did enough to get through. Egbuka came through for me. But even if I had started 0-1, then it still would have been fine. I'd still be ready to go with this competing team. So how to go from a hard rebuild to a serious contender within a short period of time. I think you don't want to just go and trade all of your picks for veterans, because that's the quickest way to go back and just kind of repeat the cycle. You want to draft some first round rookies for sure. And you want to mix in some late round dart throws as well. You want to keep the team young, and then you want to make some tactical buys. You want to go find people that are willing to rebuild, and you want to go get a couple of those like anchor piece veterans. Like if you could get a Derrick Henry at a reasonable price, or you can go and get like you could get Chuba Hubbard. I was pushing Devontae Adams this offseason as a guy that you could go and buy. Those are the types of pieces you want to mix in along with your really young roster and know, yeah, some of these guys are probably going to drop off, but they're allowing me to compete now while the rest of my team sort of ages in. So I like teams. I tend to like rosters the most when I have a ton of rookies, and then I also have some like productive older veterans, as opposed to the builds that I try to do sometimes where I try to like build a team of like young productive players, but none of them are elite or none of them are rookies. Those teams I feel like tend to underperform both in the value department and in the production department. All right. Here's a question that's not about tactics. It's just about, I'll do one more about contending, because this one was also from Jabulani, about spending your picks as a contender in an Empire League compared to a normal league. In an Empire League, you want to win back-to-back in order to reset the league. And it says, would you risk picks 2 to 3 years out? So I wouldn't play it much differently, unless it has special rules. I wouldn't play it much differently than a regular league, just because, as always, your chances of winning in a given season can only be maxed out to a certain degree, right? So you're probably doing yourself more of a long-term disservice by shipping off all of those future picks. Would I be willing to be a little bit more aggressive with short-term buys if I'm already the defending champ and I'm pushing to get that second championship? Yeah, I'd be willing to be a little more aggressive. I'd be willing to overpay a little bit, but I wouldn't just be emptying the tank or emptying the clip, trading away all my picks to try to build a super team, because I know that's a fallacy. And more likely than not, as fun as it would be to reset the league, your most likely outcome is that you're back to square one the next year trying to win those back-to-backs again. So you don't want to be shortchanging yourself in the youth department. Question from Mission. How do we view Rice? Do we buy while he's suspended? Yeah, I mean, he's absolutely a buy. I don't know why he wouldn't be a buy. Like, he looked healthy in the preseason, caught a touchdown. I have no reason to believe the injury is a concern. He's going to come back in week 7. He's going to be here barring another random injury, but from week 7 to week 17. And now Worthy's going to be out for an undetermined amount of time. Even if he's back healthy by the time Rice is back, I think he'll have lost the opportunity to build any kind of a lead on Rashee Rice. I think Rice goes back to the role he had that was very fantasy friendly, that's sort of being filled by Hollywood Brown right now, which is why he was having kind of a career game in week 1. I think he's a top 10 scoring wide receiver as soon as he's back. So yeah, I mean, I want to buy him. I traded AJ Brown for him this week. The Pokemon guy, should I trade Aaron Jones in a second for JCM? That feels like a little bit more than you should have to pay right now. I think that's a bit aggressive, honestly. Even though I'm not that big on Aaron Jones right now, I'm a little bit concerned, and I would be looking to potentially pivot off of him. I don't feel like you're getting I don't feel like you're getting a win here. I feel like you're just kind of paying like a little bit above where I have him ranked. I guess unless you have like really strong confidence, it's like a very late second. In that case, like if this is like a team that should be in line for a bye week, I guess I could see it. But if you're not starting JCM right now, I don't know if it's the right move to make for a 24-year-old running back. And if you are starting him, I don't know if you're a bye week favorite. So it's kind of a catch-22. I'd say no. All right. Nico asked about Judkins, Quinshon Judkins, possibly getting limited touches in week 2. He hasn't been suspended. He's practicing. He's right now we should probably assume that he'll be active for week 2. Has your perspective changed on the backfield? I'm struggling to see how both Judkins and Sampson can be fantasy viable assets in the Browns offense. He describes fantasy viable assets as 15 plus points per game. I think that's a mistake. Like, the vast majority of running backs are not scoring 15 points per game. The popular take is that Judkins completely takes over and becomes the bell cow. How confident are we in that actually happening with Sampson's week 1 viewing? I feel like the most accurate range of outcomes will be a split, making both not super viable fantasy backs. I think a split is the most likely outcome too, personally. I think Sampson showed a lot in the passing game last week that I haven't really seen from Judkins. Didn't really show up in his prospect profile. He's coming into this thing in the middle of it. Who knows how long it'll take for him to gain the trust of the coaching staff. I think if you want to go with, it's really hard to have a median outcome in what is like such an unprecedented situation. But I would say, like, if I was betting on the most likely outcome, my bet would be these guys end up in kind of a 50-50 split where Judkins is getting like 70-ish% of the carries and 30% of the targets, and Sampson's getting 70% of the targets and like 30% of the carries. And I think Judkins, if he gets the goal line work, will be the slightly more viable scoring option. The reason that there's such a gap in the rankings between the two of them is that I think if one of these players is going to completely steal the backfield, it's probably going to be Judkins because he's the better athlete, because he has the higher draft pedigree. If one of these guys is going to shove the other one in a locker, it's probably going to be Judkins doing it to Sampson. So I think we do need to value Judkins ahead, and this is certainly good for his outlook. It's good for, the dynasty domain boys and everybody that was on Judkins. This is about the best run out you could have hoped for. I'm shocked that it's gone this way, but this is where we're at. Still think Sampson would be the guy this week that you'd want, but yeah, it could change quickly. Austin, I think you can get a 25 bomb from Nico this week, and I say that without even knowing who they're playing, but he's always viable for a 25-pointer. All right. We're actually doing okay here with the questions. We just have a few more to get to, and then we'll wrap this thing up. It has been a long week. I am ready to see some more football games so that we can do this all again next week and change all of our opinions. And with that note, Nico asks, first time I'm using the rankings this week. I'm not going to read this whole question, but basically he wants to know about the rankings changes. Should we expect such absurd amounts of movement in future weeks as we've seen this week? Or are the rankings typically more micro changes? And how do we use this to our advantage in trade? So I'll say, first of all, no. We should not expect rankings changes to be this nuclear each and every week. You're going to see, each week you're going to see fewer and fewer players typically making big jumps. I think you're still going to see a lot of movement in week 2 and week 3. Not quite as much as week 1. And then I think you're mostly going to see smaller moves, players getting adjusted for injury, rookies breaking out, taking jobs from veterans. That's going to happen over time. But you're not going to see these massive, massive shifts, I don't think. Not nearly as much. And as far as using that to your advantage, I think generally the way you want to use the rankings is you want to look at where players have been moved. You look at where like Harold Fannin was moved this week, and you're like, okay, well, if we really do think Harold Fannin is more valuable than, let's say, Terry McLaurin, okay, then we need to go, and if I want to add a tight end or I want to get younger, let me go see if I can send Terry McLaurin, and maybe I can get Harold Fannin with a plus on top because maybe the market views this differently. So I think the reason I want to get these rankings updated immediately is so you can see what I think, which by the way, does not have to be what you think. It's just what I think. But if you have, for whatever reason, have decided that you trust me with that evaluation, then you can take that to your leagues and not just try to make one-for-one trades based on my rankings, but actually go and look at the market. You can go look at Keep Trade Cut, you can go look at Fantasy Calc, and you can actually see, okay, Paul's moved up Harold Fannin to this spot. The market's not reacting that aggressively. I'm going to try and lowball some of these offers. I'm going to try to send lesser assets. I'm going to see if I can trade Michael Pittman for Harold Fannin. I'm going to see if I can trade Alvin Kamara or Tyreek Hill for Harold Fannin, and maybe you can get some of those trades done. So in general, like looking for inefficiencies in the market, looking for where we disagree with the market, and then trying to exploit that and get the best possible deal done. That's how I would say you want to use the rankings in season. And you're welcome for the cone emoji. I like it too. I'll definitely be using it. All right. Then we have Clax, Can't Catch Clax, with a question about rebuilds. How often are you trading current or future 1s and 2s for rookies, like trading for Warren or Igbuka as a current rebuild? How far out would you accept future rookie picks for rebuilding teams when down tiering from scarce assets? So when it comes to firsts, I'll take a first in any year. I don't care if it's 26, 27, 28. Certainly if I'm getting a 2028 first, I don't expect to value it at the same level as a 2027 first. But I will take it in the trade and I will count it as a valuable piece in the trade. As far as trading away picks, I do want to avoid trading away firsts in a rebuild as much as I can. So I would want to feel like I was getting a value win in order to do it. Especially because you're bringing a player onto your team that is then going to score points, which, you know, in certain situations could make it harder for you to get the 101. So I'd say I'm generally just shying away from it. And with these types of players, Warren or Igbuka, it doesn't even really make a lot of sense to go and offer picks for them right now anyway, because like I'm trying to think of like what manager is looking to cash them out for picks. Like the only person that's trying to trade Igbuka or Warren for picks right now is either one, they're getting an overpay. Like, okay, you're going to trade me like 2 firsts and a second for Igbuka. Okay, maybe I'll accept that. Or it would have to be somebody that is just generally lower than the market on Igbuka or Warren. And the odds that the person who in your league currently rosters those players is someone who's lower than the market is just very low. Like most of the time, if you roster a player, it's because you like them as much or more than the average dynasty manager. And so I just don't know how actionable it is really to say like, yeah, go out and trade picks for these rookies that are breaking out. Like, I just don't think it happens. I think you kind of have to overpay unless the market is lagging. And like the market is lagging a little bit on Fannin. In some leagues, you can go and get him for what is a discounted price. The market is not really lagging on Warren, not really lagging on Igbuka. And so buying opportunities for those players are kind of just mythology, to be honest. T graces us with his presence. I moved Myers, JCM, Dart, and a second for Warren. Yeah, I mean, in a tight end premium league, I think that's legit. I think that's a fair move to make. That is a year. Yeah, we do need to update the logos here. I agree. That is the 1 year of membership icon. So I should go ahead and change that to a nice little rocket ship or something. I don't know what I'm going to change the other ones to. I'll have to figure it out. I don't know. I'm open to suggestions. I am so busy right now that I haven't really had any mental energy to put into that. But yeah. All right. I think I made it through all the pinned questions. Oh, Clax asked a follow-up right after I finished pinning all the questions. How do you manage multiple leagues properly? Man, I don't know if I do it properly, but I'll try. This is my second year doing Dynasty. I'm in 4 leagues after being in 1. Difficult to keep track of players and make trades. I mean, taking like, just sort of like having maybe having a document where you keep track of your different leagues, and maybe you just write down stuff like whether you're contending or rebuilding and what players you're looking to move, or what players, I don't know what I was trying to say there. Like what needs your teams have. You could try to update each week, like where do you sit in terms of record and points for, so you know like if you need to pivot. But yeah, I mean, keeping track of players, like typically what I do, because I'm in so many leagues, I'll just decide one day that like I'm sending out offers today for these players, and then I'll go into as many leagues as I can where I think I could reasonably make a trade, and I'll go and look for who has Alec Ayomanor, who has Chase Brown, who has whatever, and I'll go look for those players, and I'll see like where do I have teams where it would make sense to add these players, who rosters these players. Over time, you get to kind of know manager tendencies. Like I know managers that think like I do, and sometimes I'll just skip over. I'm like, okay, so-and-so has Alec Ayomanor. They're not going to trade him to me, so forget about that guy, and I'll move on to the next one. But for the most part, like I'm either going into specific leagues and looking at my team and thinking this team needs a running back, and then I'm sending out offers to try to get a running back, or I'm thinking today's a great day to go trade for I don't know, Luther Burden at a discount, and I'll go into a bunch of leagues and send out offers. Those are kind of the two ways that I'm managing my teams. And I think in 4 leagues, that's very doable. You just put some time aside during the week to sit down and kind of take stock of where your team's at. Maybe when you go to set your lineup, you think, okay, what could this team need, or what could I look to add? So hopefully that makes some sense. You'll get used to it for sure. All right, guys, good show. We made it. Being patient. Keep looking for trade opportunities. Week 2 is going to bring us a whole lot more information. Hopefully some of the guys that we liked that were disappointing in week 1, like Ken Walker, can come through for us. Hopefully we maybe see a little more of the rookies like Luther Burden and Colston Loveland, RJ Harvey. But we're going to keep being patient. I think things are going to come around for us. Hope you guys can all catch some W's this week, and I'll talk to you later.